announce on next year's regional conference. So, first person is...
That was my part. Yay, me!
Developing, leading, and improving college wilderness orientation programs. Ditto, big time. As a founding trustee of Outward Bound, Josh was instrumental in bringing the experiential philosophy of Kurt Hahn to the United States. Conference attendees were fortunate to hear about Josh's vision and passion firsthand as he shared stories, metaphors, and lessons of children, curiosity, and character. As a region, we felt very lucky to have had Josh there and experienced that time with him, and wanted to capture the essence of the wisdom from experienced practitioners have. The Northeast Regional Advisory Council then established the Josh Miner Dialogue Series in 2003 in memory of Josh Miner. Instead of the usual lecture format, the Dialogue Series takes on a different format in which a seasoned professional in the field of experiential education interviews the honorary. The series allows participants to get to know the honorary on a more personal level while learning of their best practices, nuggets of wisdom, and sometimes stories of what not to do. The Northeast Region Advisory Council, in conjunction with the Regional Host Committee, selects the Josh Miner Dialogue Series. This year, we are very proud to be honoring Phil Costello. Named synonymous with Project U.S.E. Interviewing Phil this evening is Amy Klein. If you ask Amy what she does, you will hear. It's long, get ready for this. I am an ocean-based classroom outdoor educator. Amy attributes the type of teacher she is today, a teacher who has been recognized by her peers and received many awards, to what she learned while working at Project U.S.E. The things like the word no does not exist. Creativity isn't understood. And what you do is for the kids. She discovered her teaching passion, and she also did learn that sleeping on the top of a roof in Newark to work with kids in New York City is just part of the job. Nothing really unusual.
So we're just here to tell a few stories. So Voices of Experience. Really making way for the connection and the journey. We're here to acknowledge a pioneer in experiential education and his journey and how he came into experiential education and the fact that it's changed hundreds of thousands of lives. But whether you know him or not, or you have heard his name before, or your first, second, third, sixth removed from him, every single person in this room actually knows Phil or knows someone who knows Phil, because we're all connected and everybody knows Phil. So by the end of tonight, you'll know him so well, like you have been on so many trips with him. So it's a rare and a very real treat. But I wanted to say that I've known Phil for about 10 years, but Phil doesn't know that. Almost, actually 10 years ago to today, I met Phil when I was living in the Florida Keys, because the same day I met Preston Klein. And I knew more about Project U.S.E. in those 24 hours of knowing him than many of you know right this second. And you'll know, more by the end of tonight. But the funny thing was is that 4 years later from that moment of learning about Phil, I didn't realize that I would be tromping through a swamp waist deep with 20 people that would follow by climbing a 60-foot tree, and then later be asked, so what are your highs and your lows today? You know, or, I mean, it just sort of goes on and on, or canoeing at 3 a.m., or walking through the Pine Barrens on a 24-hour experience looking for water with maps that were set up in 1956. So, I mean, the list just goes on and on, but you're going to hear about this evening. But since 1970, Project U.S.E has been in existence, and Phil founded and has been since the executive director of Project U.S.E. If you don't know, Project U.S.E takes inner city youth into the wilderness, be it adults actually, or kids, and changes their lives. In addition, he's been a teacher in the Trenton High School Action Bound program, an instructor at Hurricane Island Outward Bound. He's been the director of the Baltimore Chesapeake Bay Outward Bound program, a member of the U.S. Marine Corps, a proud father of 2, married for 38 years, a mentor to many, and an inspiration to literally thousands. And I just want you to join me in welcoming Phil Costello.
We're not quite sure how we're going to play this scene up here tonight, but we'll figure it out.
So, what's going to happen is I'm going to ask Phil a few questions, and then we're going to show you some slides from his life so you'll get to see into what happened there, and then we'll open it up to you to ask a few questions, and then we'll turn it back over to Phil for a closing, and have a great night. So, Phil. All right, so when do you feel like your journey into adventure education began?
I was pondering that question for a while, and I went into the Marine Corps out of high school because I really didn't want to go to college. I wanted to get out of South Jersey for a while. And I spent about 3 years in this really great reconnaissance unit all before Vietnam started. And I thought back to one night when we were in the Mediterranean working with some Greek Marines. And we were doing a lot of rubber boat stuff, and the group we were with had never done any rubber boat stuff. So we were, there were about 6 different boats, and we were paddling into one of the Greek islands, I think Crete. And before we left the boat, this officer came over to me and goes, the Greeks that are going to be in your boat have all these new radios from NATO. They're about $100,000 of radios. They're going to be in your boat tonight. And it was a pretty rough sea, and I was only 18 years old. I go, gee, this is a lot of stuff to be putting on me, you know. So I had one other American Marine and 5 Greek Marines and way more equipment than we wanted to in this rubber boat. And what we usually do when we trained was we would paddle in somewhere, deflate the boat, bury it or hide it, and then do whatever we had to do, and then come back and then pull the CO2 thing, fill it up, and go back to where we came from. So we took off on this rubber boat, and we're paddling in, and I noticed that one of the Greeks in the front had fallen asleep. He took like a paddle, and then he just kind of slumped over. It's probably 3 in the morning, typical kind of stuff. So the tradition was that whoever was the coxswain, and that was me, would lean forward with the paddle and tap him on the head, you know, like, okay, that's enough of that. So I go, okay, it's time to wake this guy up, and I step in and go to tap him, and I hear this, and I knew right away I put my foot through the CO2 bottle rope and kicked the CO2 bottle off. So the boat is inflating, doubling now. And for 5 seconds I thought, all right, I have 5 non-English speaking guys in my boat and 1 guy that I can understand. I said, I have about 25 seconds before the boat blows up. What the hell am I going to do? So the Greeks, they realized something was wrong. They were looking at me going, like this, and I'm going, yeah, trying to and a couple of them are ready to jump overboard. I go, I'm not losing these radios because I know the Marine Corps make me pay for them the rest of my life. So we very quickly came up with this plan of, and we knew if we had 8 valves in the boat, the other Marine and I quickly showed one Greek what we had to do. We had to let some air out of all the valves, and if we let too much air out, the boat would sink. And if we didn't let enough out, it would blow up. So we came up with this quick little plan, and everybody's yelling and screaming and Greek and, carrying on. We managed to pull it off. We probably let out a little bit too much air. The boat was pretty floppy. But I was a nervous wreck. I kept saying, this is too much stress for me. I'm 18. But when we got to the beach, I go, hey, that was great. I don't know what you call it, but I liked it. I want to do some more of that. What's the next thing that's coming out? I thought back the other day to that era, and I thought one thing that always was very comical was we usually got briefed by some Navy officers, and they would say, here's the mission for tonight. And then we'd be piling in, and we'd be talking amongst the other Marines, and I go, does anybody know what country we're invading tonight? No, nobody told us what country. We know the name of the town, but we wouldn't even know what country. I go, shouldn't we know stuff like that? We're invading people's country, we had weapons, and it was all peacetime, and it was all fun. But, shouldn't they know we're coming or something? So that was I think that night, piling in, and I figured that was my first initiative test that I ever had to do. I thought, that's a pretty serious first one, But managed to pull it off and get in alive.
So, if we transition into life after the Marine Corps, how did you first connect with Hurricane Island?
I went to Trenton State College, and I saw an advertisement there about Minnesota Outward Bound. I wrote some letters, and Peter Willauer, who was starting Hurricane Island, wrote to me and hooked me up with Vince Lee, who was eventually designed the North Carolina School. And I built a ropes course in the Marine Corps in '62, and Hurricane wanted to build a ropes course, so Vince and I went up to lend him a hand. And this is 1965. No courses had been run yet, I don't believe. And there were about 10 or 12 people up at Hurricane building the island, building buildings and tent platforms, and putting in the ropes course and putting in the rock climbing. And the way we would staff train is we'd work during the day, and then at night we would get together and say, I know some sailing. All right, let's teach some sailing tonight. I know some rock climbing. Let's teach some rock climbing tonight. And you had to realize that none of us had ever had a course before, either been in a course or taught a course. And we kept saying, what is a course anyway? There were about 4 folks from Britain and 1 from Australia that were coming in to teach us how to do a course, and how to run it. We kept thinking, well, how do you behave? Do you behave like a drill instructor? Do you behave like your father? What's the attitude, and what's our role? Nobody knew anything. One of the things that I always recall from then is, this is before there were any programs, and everybody assumed a lot of things about people. And I woke up one day during this period and went down to the dining hall, and everybody had gone off the island and do different things, and there was a note there. And we're 12 miles out in the ocean, if you know Hurricane Island. We're off the coast of Rockland. And there's a note there, Phil, take the Hurricane, that's one of our big boats, a little bigger than a lobster boat. Take the Hurricane and go to Rockland and pick up these 5 people. There's 5 names. I'm the only one on the island, and I go, that's a great idea, except I've never driven a boat before. They go, they can't be serious. I go, I've only been from Rockland to Hurricane 1 time, and I didn't have any idea where I was, how to get to Rockland, how to drive a boat. And I go, this must be one of those initiative tests. So I found the keys and got the charts out. I was sweating bullets. I know if you run into things like in New Jersey, you hit a sandbar. Up there, you hit, a granite wall. So I was a nervous wreck. And drove this boat to Rockland. And when I pulled into the harbor, there was about 100 boats I had to steer between. I had every possible thing hanging over the side of this boat, tires, buoys, anything that was rubber, that would bounce off stuff. Just pulled up to the dock, and there were these other people waiting. I go, could somebody else try it back? I couldn't do that twice in one day. That was my first boating experience. I think two of the things that kind of fit into the project a little bit about the 5 years in the Marine Corps was, number one, just being resourceful. The Marine Corps has the smallest budget of all the services and never throws anything out. We had boats and jeeps with Coast Guard markings on them that I know somebody pulled out of a dump somewhere. And so being resourceful and just never don't quit. And I thought I saw just a lot of guys really grow up and learn about teamwork and learn to get through difficult things. And I thought, this is really good stuff. I don't know if I'll ever use it anymore, but what was happening there was really great. And, the early years of Hurricane were really wonderful.
So tell us about Action Bound.
I guess in the late 60s, Greg Farrell was one of the people that interviewed me to work in Trenton High School in an Action Bound program, which was funded by the Ford Foundation. Outward Bound had a big stake in it. And it was to see if Outward Bound, if it made any sense to put it into a big urban high school. At that point, there were about 3,000 kids in Trenton High School. It was a really big mix of black, white, Hispanic kids, and the school sat right in the middle of all the geographical areas of the city. And we had a team of teachers working. All the kids had dropped out and were coming back to school, 10th graders mostly. And we had a team of teachers that worked with the kids and taught all the subject matter and then did all the Outward Bound things on weekends and day trips. I think for me it was a period of time to think, well, I really like this stuff. I wanted to be sure it worked. I wanted to be sure we did what we said we did. And one of the stories I remember was I had a group my partner Jose and I had a group of kids up in Stokes Forest for a weekend. We put them off in little groups and gave them a bunch of things they had to do, including writing about how they got there. They had to build something to trade for food, and it was really a lot of fun, and the kids were having a ball with it. And Monday morning, this English teacher came into my office and she said, "What in the name of God did you do to Freddie Burke this weekend?" I said, "Why? What happened?" She goes, "I've taught Freddie for 3 years. He's never written a sentence. He's just a quiet little kid in the corner. Today he turned in a 30-page journal of his experience with his team. And the 30-year journal, meaning he covered 30 years of this group being stranded in the wilderness from a plane crash." And she goes, "I've never seen anything like this." And she goes, "Whatever you did, just keep doing it." And Freddie and I became good friends, and but it was an example to me that what we're doing does work, and that we reach a lot of kids that couldn't be reached otherwise. And Action Bound was great. And we just wish we had a few more years with it. I think it probably ran close to 5 years before the funding ran out. It was a great time too because a lot of the Outward Bound school directors came. First chance I had to meet Willie Unsold and all the other school directors came to see what we were doing and get to know the city a little bit. And my other favorite Action Bound story was, working in New Jersey is not easy. There were a lot of, it took Jose and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out where to go with kids that would seem like at least wilderness, or pocket wilderness or something. So we came up with this expedition idea one year of we had 3 groups of kids, 4 kids to a team. We dropped them off one place, we gave them a map, we gave them some food, we said, "All right, 24 hours, you have to meet us here. And here's a place where you can camp tonight, and somebody's going to meet you and do a little canoeing, or somebody's going to meet you and do rock climbing, and I'll meet you tomorrow morning and debrief a little bit and tell you what's happening the next day. So it was going along pretty good. The kids were into it. We had a lot of people helping us with it. And the last morning I thought I'd have some fun with them, so I took them all some food and some money and a live chicken. Just gave all 3 groups everything, and then I said, I'll see you in 24 hours, and this is where you have to meet me. So I was dying to figure out what the heck they were going to do. Met the first group. I said, what you guys do with the chicken? Said, well, Howard knew how to clean it and cook it, so we cleaned it, cooked it, and ate it. I go, oh, that's great. Met the second group. What do you guys do with your chicken? We went to an Acme and traded it for frozen chicken. I said, well, that's pretty creative. That's pretty good. Couldn't find the third group anywhere. They weren't at their spot. Was driving around. Couldn't find them. Finally, find them. And I go, no, I couldn't find them, but I saw this woman with her car in the ditch. So I stopped and I said, are you okay? What happened? She goes, came around the bend and there were 3 black kids walking a chicken on a leash. I drive up the road and there's the guys who go, we love this thing. We're going to take them home. Don't take them away from us. I go, no, well, you can take them home. That's okay. The kids were pretty imaginative, all 3 groups had a great time. I was racking my brain for the last couple of years trying to find, I have the picture of the 4 kids with that chicken, but it's one of the slides that slid into the black hole of the missing slides.
So, chickens. Well, it's funny because when you said chickens, this next question has to do with the word on-site. And when you talk about, ooh, how was your on-site course? Rubber chickens are always involved. But when was the first on-site course?
I'm assuming people know what an on-site and other programs do them. If a school calls and says, like, we only have a little bit of money, can you come to our school and do a program? We can't get up to your Wilderness Center in North Jersey. And we'd say, yeah, well, we'll come over and we'll bring some activities, we'll do something at the school, and we call that an on-site. So I was still at Trenton High School in '69 when Willie Unseld called from Outward Bound Incorporated and said, hey, I got this idea. There's a school in Philadelphia. They want us to Outward Bound to do something, and we thought maybe we'll recruit some kids for the summer. Can you bring some stuff? We'll go to the school and we'll do something. Bob Lynch was the third person that came with us from, I think it was Chestnut Hill Academy, if I'm not wrong. So the 3 of us went and we did this first program, going to a school that I know of, setting up some detention traverse and a bunch of other activities, and put all the kids through it. And the highlight for me that day was there was a bell tower at the school, and Willie at the end of the day said, Phil, you want to climb the bell tower? It doesn't look too bad. And I said, okay, we can go play with that. So there were a series of like alcoves or ledges, and there were some pipes. And the bottom part was pretty easy, and then as we got to the top, it got a little wider. And we were up pretty high at this point, and he wanted me to lead this last pitch to get to the top platform. So I started up there and kind of got stuck. And I knew he had sort of an imaginary belay on me. He wasn't tied into anything. He was kind of standing there with a little hip belay about 40 feet up. There's a little piece of pipe there, if you didn't mind tying into that. And I tried about 4 different ways to get up, and I couldn't get up. And he goes, well, Phil, he was a guide and Tetons for years. He goes, well, Phil, you know what we do with the guides? He goes, we let our clients step on our heads sometime, to make the last hold. I go, Willie, I got Limmer hiking boots on. You don't want me standing on your head, and I'm not a little guy. Now he goes, no, it's okay. You can do it, and then you should be able to grab the pipe. I didn't want to step on anybody's head, giant, big old hiking boots. But I did, I made sure, I said, I'll make a really quick little leap. I stood on his head, and I could hear him down there, like, God, you're I just kind of jumped up and grabbed this pipe, and we got out of there alive. I thought, well, that was the first on-site, and it was pretty momentous.
So tell us about how Project U.S.E began.
In 1970, the Action Bound program lost, didn't have additional funding. We had some from the state of New Jersey and the Ford Foundation and places. And it was all drying up. And my partner Jose and I were called into the principal's office, and he said, well, you have a choice. He goes, by 2 days, I need to know if you want to take a classroom job or leave. So we literally went and had a couple of beers that night and said, what are we going to do? And Jose was a little more inspiring than I was at the time. He said, why don't we think about starting our own nonprofit business? He said, we can take everything we learned here the last couple of years and move it. So we talked about it. That's a great idea. We'll create a resource in New Jersey that could work with schools and continue doing what we're doing. So we told the principal that was our plan. We were going to leave and we wouldn't take a teaching position. Now, Jose's wife and my wife was not that excited about this project. I came home and told my wife where we were going. My wife, Bobby, is here tonight. I said, I get this great idea. We're going to start a business, Jose and I. Jose had 4 children. And my wife reminded me that she had just left her teaching position, was pregnant with our first child. She thought, don't you think one of us should have a job? Well, we'll figure that out eventually. And that's how the project started. We kind of broke all the rules for starting a business. We had no money, no grants, no vehicles, no place. We had a lot of ideas, and we just said, somehow we're going to take this stuff we've been doing, all the programs in Trenton High School, and continue doing them in other places. But, I mean, it was a little risky. You can just kind of picture yourself. If you stepped off tomorrow and just said, I want to start this new thing. And, after 2 days, we already owed the IRS money. We were in debt in 3 days. So it was a little scary, but we figured somehow we would get through it and make it work.
So what experiences did you draw from in developing your early course curriculum? Because you made it past those 3 days.
We, Jose and I agreed on a lot of things. We really embraced the outward bound philosophy. We said we wanted to be sort of a mini version of it in New Jersey, with maybe a little more emphasis on environment. At that point in New Jersey, there were a lot of huge environmental issues, and we thought, we'll take the adventure stuff, we'll take the environmental stuff, and I drew a lot of stuff also, from the Marine Corps. We did about 100 24-hour experiences. You're here, you got to get there, you got 24 hours, and here's what you have to do in the meantime. But we incorporated little things like that, hiking at night, the 24-hour experience, and endless things. But we wanted to take the outward bound philosophy, merge it with the environmental stuff, and kind of create our own version of what we wanted to do.
So what were some of your big concerns for the first 5 years?
Obviously, trying to get some money, get the thing funded, find a place. Where were we going to get people to, help us with this project? How were we going to find staff? And, could we survive, the first couple of years? One of the disappointing things is we went to talk to the Commissioner of Education that year was Carl Marburger, who was a great guy. He was very well liked. And we went, we were all excited. We had this, man, we had this great idea. And he goes, Phil and Jose, he goes, you're 10 years early. The experiential movement will hit New Jersey, about 1980. He says, you ought to just go do something else for 10 years. Well, we're kind of into it now. We stepped off and we're going to figure this out. We're going to make it work.
So how long did it take before you found Wildcat Mountain Wilderness Center?
First 2 years, we didn't have a site. We kept all our stuff in our homes. My wife would open up closets and, climbing ropes and canteens, and our rain gear would fall out, and I'd get yelled at. What are you going to do? And, it's, we were so lucky, and you know how things, people's paths cross and all that. Somebody told us about this gentleman who owned a lot of land in North Jersey who was thinking about using it with kids. His name was Fred Ferber. He was the inventor of the ballpoint pen. He invented the ballpoint pen and sold it to Parker. He made a lot of money. He bought 6,000 acres of land in New Jersey. And his dream was to have kids use the area for education. When we met him, he hadn't figured out how to do that yet. And we said, well, we have some schools interested, we have this, we don't have a place. And we said, I'll let you use my land, and we pulled out some old maps from the 1800s, and there was Wildcat Ridge. So we became that day the Wildcat Mountain Wilderness Center. And we were just so lucky to meet Fred. It was like having our own little national park. We're right on the New York-New Jersey border, like a mile from New York City. It's a pretty rugged place. There's a lot of former staff here that can attest to that. It's a rugged area. And our idea was to keep it fairly primitive, as you see in a couple of the slides. We didn't want an elaborate place. We didn't think we needed it. We really wanted a kind of a base camp to work from. And we were amazed when we saw this place. There were black bear, deer on the property, and rattlesnakes. You could hike for 7 or 8 days and not cross a road or see a house. And an hour from New York City, people won't believe that they're still in New Jersey when they come up there. We were very lucky.
So let's talk about some of the staff. So I'm a female staff, and female staff are pretty cool, but when did you first hire? Because I know that was when that happened.
Even when Jose and I were in Trenton High School, there were no female staff that we knew of. There were none that ever applied, and we knew we would need them, down the road. So my brother Vince and I ran 3 different summers, a 16-day course for 10 high school girls. And over the period of years, out of those 30 kids, I'd say probably 12 of them came back to work when they were in college and became our first, lead instructors. And probably 8 of them went from us down to North Carolina out-of-bounds school after a couple of years. So we had a great cycle of high school kids coming in, going to college, coming to work for us, and going down to North Carolina. And we've always had a tradition of having really, both really great, strong women in the project. And I think it started, right from the early years of the women, wanting to show the guys that, hey, look, anything you can do, we can do better, and proving that day in and day out.
Government assistance.
I think it's okay to tell this story. I'm not sure. There's a couple of little category. Mid-70s, we were doing everything we could to stay alive. And if we had any help we could get, we'll take. So I kept getting all this information from the government food program about how they were helping a lot of camps out. And a lot of the stuff was signed by this guy, Walter Collender. And I go, when I used to go to camp in the Pine Barrens, my counselor was a guy named Wally Collender. I wonder if they're related. So I made an appointment and went to see him. And it was my counselor from when I was a kid in the Pines. And we were happy to see each other. And I go, listen, you got me into this mess. You need to help me a little bit. He said, what do you mean? So I told him, I said, we have this wilderness center in northern New Jersey. We could use some help. I said, if we could get into the food program somehow, that would be great. So he gives me this booklet about 80 pages long. He goes, here's all the requirements you need to have. You have to have, temperature control this, temperature control that, storage, this, that. And he goes, how about that? You meet all those requirements? And actually,
I don't think we meet any of them. I said, we don't have any of that stuff. I said, but we could still, use that food. That would really help. Yeah, Phil, I don't know how I can help you out here. What do you think about that? He said, I might be able to do something for you. He said, let me send the paperwork in. Let me see what I can do. So he sent all the paperwork in, and sure enough, we start to get, 6, 8, 10 cases of food a month. It was simple stuff, peanut butter and jelly, rice, and every once in a while, later on, some frozen food. But, it was really a big help. And then all of a sudden, I get this call from a guy. He goes, I'm, Louis Giovanni, I am your health inspector. He said, and I'll need to come up and check your facility out in a couple of weeks. He goes, tell me about it. He goes, do you meet all the requirements? I go, well, pretty much. Pretty much. He's going to kill me when he comes back. He goes, what about this? The temperature controlled that, and mice proof this. Yeah, pretty much. He goes, well, I'm an older guy and I got a bad leg. He said, can I drive into your facility? I go, you really can. I said, it's about like a 4-mile walk, which is a little while. About a couple-mile walk in, and I said, but we'll be glad to help you out somehow. I go, wow. And I can hear him, and I can almost hear, while I'm telling him something. He goes, well, this is what I'm going to do this time. I'm going to check off that you meet all the requirements. But in 3 months, I have to come back up, and then I'm going to be dry. I'm going to come up there and make sure you meet everything. Well, he didn't come for 5 years. And when the frozen food started to come, that was a concern because we didn't want to lose that. It would be stuff like chicken and ground beef. So we made a deal. We did a lot of shopping in the Acme. We made a deal with the Acme. They gave us a space in their refrigerator, the Project U.S.E corner for all the frozen food. So when you went into the Acme freezer, that's where our food was, and there was a big sign, Project U.S.E staff only pick this stuff. And, so it helped us out for 5 years, and it was a great boon to us. And then when it came off, they saw, well, actually, when they found out we were taking it on trips out of state, then they said, you can't be in the project anymore. That's really a no-no. I said, okay, you'll live with that. It was a great government help for a while.
I never figured out how to take frozen chicken on a course.
That was staff.
So, New Jersey had the first Camp Safety Act in the nation, but how did it help the project?
Camp safety, in 1973 there were a couple drownings at New Jersey camps. So the next year they came up with this Camp Safety Act program. And I think there's about 18 states that have it now. In the first few years they were mostly concerned with facilities. There wasn't too much going on with training or anything like that. So they would come up to our site and they would go, where's your swimming pool? We go, well, we don't have a swimming pool. Go, okay, you failed. All right, where's your archery range? Well, we don't do archery here. We're in the adventure program. All right, well, you failed that. They had this rule about you needed something like 60 cubic feet of breathing space in the sleeping area. I go, well, we're using 3-person tents. We don't have 60 cubic feet per kid. You failed that. So they went down and just failed us for everything for probably 10 years. And then I would write a letter every year and explain, well, we didn't fail it because we don't have it, we don't need it, whatever. And we used to drive them crazy because they would say, you guys, when you're hiking like on the Appalachian Trail, do you swim or do you wash? They go, well, there's no place to swim. I said, but we wash up along the trail. They go, well, you need a 9-foot-high lifeguard chair. Does that mean I have to take that with us? Well, that's going to be a little difficult. But after 10 years of all these crazy things, and then they started paying more attention to training schedules and when more camps in New Jersey came up with challenge cases, we got into that. And then it was much more of a help, preceding all the AEE stuff. But initially, it was crazy and failed us. And then for 10 years, the guy goes, you're different here, aren't you? We're really not like Camp Sunshine. We've got some different things going on, and we'll be glad to try to, stick to the regs as best we can. And they've been pretty good for a while, and last year this ugly thing surfaced, and they came up with this new thing for us. Canoeing in the Pine Barrens, if you can imagine, is, it's like canoeing through a jungle. You can't walk along the shore or anything. And this one inspector last year said, we have a great idea, it's going to help your program. Whenever you have a canoe trip, we want you to have a lifeguard with 2 ring buoys run along the shore following your trip in case they need help rescue anybody. And I said to them, have you ever canoed in the Pine Barrens? He said, no, I've never canoed anywhere, but I know it's a great idea. First of all, it's really not that great an idea, take my word for it. But I had to show her a receipt that we bought the ring buoys. And then she said, okay.
So can you tell us about any strange experiences you've had with bartering for equipment?
Yes, bartering has been a big part of our life. And I've also always felt like I had a squadron of angels following me around since 1970. Whenever we needed them, they would come in and help me out. So I'm going back to maybe 1980, 81. We were renting a house in Long Branch, New Jersey, and that was our administrative office. We were still doing stuff at our center and in the Pine Barrens. And we had 4 of us working out of this office. And I had been renting it for 2 years from another nonprofit. 1st of May, which is, May for all of us is a crazy one. I got this letter saying, Phil, we need the house back that you're renting. We're going to put a senior citizen program in here. You have 30 days to move it. And I went and I begged for time. I go, it's May. I said, we're out the whole month doing programs. I can't do it in May. I said, give me some more time. He goes, you got to be out the last day in May. And so we're calling people, writing letters, trying to find some space. We needed 3 offices. Couldn't find anything. And I, again, asked for more time. He goes, no, on Saturday morning, we're moving in. You've got to be out Friday night. So I had no clue. We were starting to pack stuff up. We had nowhere to go. And I remembered that I'd been driving by this small Catholic elementary school for 3 or 4 years. Didn't know anybody there. I go, take a ride down, just talk, see if anybody's there. Maybe they have some space. So I go down at 4 o'clock. I go down, knock on the door, and this nun, Sister Michael Vincent, comes to the door. She goes, can I help you? My name's Phil Costello. I wondered if you have a few minutes I can talk with you. Yeah, come on. And she looks at her watch. Come on. So, and I just go, well, I have an idea. I said, I just wanted to bounce this off you. I was wondering if maybe you had some space in the school that we could exchange some trips for. If we had some space, we would do some outdoor experiences for your 7th and 8th grade. And that would be the swap. We wouldn't pay for rent, and we wouldn't charge you for the experiences. She's thinking for a while. I'm kind of interested. We do have some space downstairs where we used to have some 1st graders who aren't there anymore. She goes, is this something you were thinking about for next year? I was thinking about maybe in about an hour. Just see her start to shake. What am I getting into? And she goes, and we just kind of hit it off. She goes, all right, we got to go down and see the parish priest. You let me do the talk. So we go down and see this Father Christie, and she's talking to him like we've been talking for months. Now, Phil and I have been working on this plan. I think it'd be really good for for our kids. And his program is good, and we need to get I want him to move in really quickly, and can we do the lease tonight and get him a key? And he's thinking, the heck? Oh, an hour later, I walked out with a lease and a key. Went back and told the rest of the staff, I said, we can pack the van now, we got a place to go. They go, no way! 4 o'clock you left here, we didn't have a place. My guardian angel took care of it tonight, we got a place, and we stayed there probably 4 or 5 years. And then the school eventually closed, went out of business. But the second year we were there, I realized that Sister Michael was living in a convent with 18 bedrooms, and she was the last nun left. So partly as a joke, I said, and we didn't have a staff house at the time. I said, Sister, would you be interested in renting part of the convent? And she knew our crew. There was, a wild bunch. And she goes, well, I'd love the company. She goes, I could rent you the front half. That would be like 7 bedrooms. You have a kitchen and a lounge. She goes, I can rent you that space. And I said, that's great. So we stayed there about 3 or 4 years in the convent. At one of the AEE conferences, somebody asked me about our program and what our facilities were. I said, well, we have a primitive wilderness center in northern New Jersey. We're building a sailboat in a condemned boatyard in Monmouth County. Our Pine Barren base camp was in a gravel pit. And I said, and we have a convent. Just shake their head and say, what the hell kind of program is that? New Jersey, that's what we got to work with. We're doing good.
So when did you start working with adjudicated youth?
Started working with adjudicated youth in the 70s, really just doing some day experiences with, at that point, the Department of Juvenile Services. New Jersey was pretty progressive with working with kids. We had a couple different models we worked with. A couple, Anthony and Jeff, that are here tonight, and Justine. A number of people worked in our TREC program, developing our TREC program, which was really one of the best programs in the state, where we take kids out for 35 days before they went home. They were adjudicated, they were locked up. We would recruit them, do 35 days, and have them go home from there. And New Jersey operates about 20 programs on their own. We were the only private contractor working with the TREC program. And the only year that they did any research, the state programs were 76% recidivism, and the TREC program was 39%. And it was, a combination of, really intense wilderness experiences and team building and a lot of really cool community service projects. And that's the model that we don't have any funding for it right now, but we'll have it back eventually, and we will, continue doing that. But we've always worked with, either at-risk kids or, adjudicated youth. It's always been a big part of the project. And one of the things we learned from that was never to assume things. One of our early programs, we were running some winter courses. And it was like a 12-day course, and I went out maybe on the 5th day. And we had really bought a lot of good equipment, so we could do the winter courses. So I was sitting around the campfire eating dinner with the kids, and I asked them how everything was going. They go, it's pretty good, we're having a good time. Except at night, we're cold, our feet are cold at night. And I think, man, I got these really expensive mummy bags. How their feet are cold? I said, well, let's hang out tonight. So we gave them some tips: dry your feet, make sure you don't go to bed with wet, feet under your socks, stuff like that. So we waited for a while. Went in, I looked in one of the 3-person tents, and they had crawled in head first. Three pairs of feet looking out at me. I assumed that they would know how to get in. Nobody told me. So
We rectified that problem that night. We also, learned a lot about, again, assumptions. When I don't know if Anthony was on this trip, but we had one of our trek programs in the Gulf of Mexico one year in Florida, and we did a canoe trip through the Gulf of Mexico. When the kids were back in New Jersey, they were doing a presentation to their parents, and this one kid was telling me, he goes, "We had such a great time piloting canoes in the Gulf of Mexico." He goes, "Now one day, Mr. Costello," he goes, I was the safety officer. I was the bow person in the first canoe, and we were paddling along, and a manatee came up and bumped their canoe." He goes, "I looked over and saw that thing. I didn't know what the heck it was. I stood up and blew my whistle and yelled out, 'Sea monster! Sea monster!'" All the other boats are back. As quick as they could paddle. He said, "That thing was looking at me. I knew it was going to eat me." We just had to get out of there. Adjudicating has been a big part of the project, and we always continue to learn 100 other stories, but they were two that felt.
So what about those unusual donations that Project has received over the years?
Donations. We were never really super big fundraising stuff, but I'll show you some. We were building a pulling boat one year in a boatyard, and we thought it'd be great to have a pulling boat in New Jersey. We bought the plans through Hurricane Island, and we had a bunch of kids building this pulling boat. And the boatyard, I went to a bunch of boatyards to see if we could use their boatyard, and everybody said, "No, we don't want any kids here. We don't want any minority kids here. We don't want any boat projects here." And I'd been to about every boatyard I knew of, and then somebody said, "Go up and talk to Albert Lukes. He's a retired school principal up by Sandy Hook. Yeah, maybe you could work something out with him." I went up. I wasn't even done telling him what we wanted to do. He said, "Bring the boat in here whenever you want. Bring the kids in here." So we were working on the boat, but Albert had a huge group of retired guys that hung out at the boatyard. He had refrigerators of beer, and nobody. You weren't even allowed to be there if you weren't 75 years old. They would drink beer and eat peanuts and tell stories. It was just, they were welders and carpenters and plumbers, just a wild crew, and they loved talking to our kids. So one Christmas, I was the last one out of the office for a surprise. This woman comes in, she goes, "I'm a nurse at the local hospital. I know about Project U.S.E. I'd like to make a donation to you." I go, "Really?" I'm hoping it's a check, of course. She goes, "I own a 55-foot mobile home that my father's been living in, but he's moving in with me. And I'd like to donate it to Project U.S.E. It's a few miles away in Eatontown at the trailer park." How can I go wrong with this? Maybe we could use it for a staff house or whatever. She goes, "And I'm leaving for a couple of weeks. I want to give you the title right now." They don't even know this lady. They go, "But there's no way we could have a problem with this deal." So she signs the title of it. So after Christmas, the other staff member, Bob, and I, we go to check the trailer out. And it's big. It's a 2-bedroom trailer. It's got a kitchen. It's got everything in there. And we're in there looking around thinking, "Man, we could move a couple of staff in here. This is great, right in the middle of everything." And there's a knock at the door. Trailer park owner comes in. He goes, "You the new owner in number 12? And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Buddy, you got problems." "What kind of problems? I only own this thing like for 2 days." He said, "Well, on January 3rd, this trailer is 20 years old. You can't have a 20-year-old trailer in New Jersey. You can't live in it." He said, "And also, it's illegal to move it." First, I wanted to go find that nurse and strangle her. And I said, "Let me get this straight. In like 3 more days, I can't live in this trailer and I can't move it." He goes, "That's right." He said, "Then that's your problem. You have to figure it out." Heck, I don't know anything about this stuff. What am I going to do? So I was going up to the boatyard to take a Christmas present to Al, and all of his crew was there having beer and peanuts. And So I told them my saga. I said, I just got this thing donated. I go, can't use it, can't have it. And they go, well, could we have it? And I said, you can have it. I said, but I don't know how you're going to move it or anything. He goes, we'll take care of that. So I signed the title over and then I only had the title a couple of days. So that night it snowed. And I drove by the trailer park the next morning. Here's the tire marks right across the ground. In the snow, the thing is gone. So I went to the boatyard and they're all up there. They had black paint on their face. Black hats. And about 6 of them pulled this raid and just took the trailer right out of For them it was like being back in World War II. I was just fighting, see who was going to drive, and hook the propane tank. And as far as I know, they're still using it in the little corners. After that day, I was always a little suspicious when somebody says, I have a great donation. All right, let's see what you got.
So tell us how you reconnected with Baltimore Outward Bound.
I guess it was 1986, and Hurricane Ian was starting the Baltimore Chesapeake Bay Outward Bound program, and Will Lauer and Jerry Armstrong came to see me, and said, is there any way you could work it out so you could come down to Baltimore for a while? And I said, well, first I said no a couple times, and they said, come on, it'd be great. We'd like to develop some stuff like what you're doing here in Outward Bound in Baltimore. So I actually had been at the Estes Park AEE conference right before that. And I met a lot of guys that I knew that were on sabbaticals, you know, for 4 or 5, 6 months. And I probably met 4 guys, and I go, man, that's a great idea, you know, taking a sabbatical. I said, I'd like to go around, see what some of the other programs are doing. So I talked to first my board of trustees about doing that. I said, yeah, you can do that. And then Peter and George were after me about, you know, maybe taking some time to go to Baltimore. So I went down to Baltimore and met the folks, and I was really excited about, you know, taking what we've done from Trenton to Project U.S.E to Baltimore. So I don't know how this worked out. I worked it out with our board that I'd work in Baltimore 5 days a week and then come up and work the weekends at Project U.S.E. So I went from taking a 6-month sabbatical to running 2 programs. That wasn't my original plan. When I first went to Baltimore, we didn't have a site there yet. We knew we would be moving into one of the city parks. And the first couple of months, I shared an office with the Park Service Nature Center. And I had a desk in there, and I had a boa constrictor, I had an owl, and I had a couple of lizards, and a bunch of smaller things. And they were all in the office with me. So it was a little weird. And I was starting to interview for staff for the first summer at Baltimore. And the first interviewee came with a nice shirt and tie, and we were talking for 45 minutes or so. And it was going pretty well. But the owl got real excited. And he started flying all around the room and crapped all over this guy's shirt. And I go, hey, pal, I don't know what to tell you. It never happened to me, you know, before. I never had that experience. He said, yeah, no, me either. We didn't hire him in the end anyway. Eventually moved to one of the city parks. Baltimore is a great program, and I relearned something about community service that I think it took with me forever. Our first summer we did a combined land program, sea program, and community service. We were working with Habitat for Humanity in Baltimore. We spent the last 3 days of a course living in a Methodist church working for Habitat for Humanity. They were trying to rehab an entire block all on their own. It was an important lesson to learn regarding the service and incorporating it into what we do.
So my next question actually has to do with project success stories, and can you tell a couple more, or a more than one?
I think as teachers, you know, we always have opportunities to maybe just do a little something for somebody not knowing what's going to happen with it. And one quick story. Probably, I'm not sure what year it was, in the late 80s. We were doing a lot of work in Newark. We identified the city of Newark as a place we wanted to really focus a lot of energy on. And we ran a bunch of day programs with this West Side High School, which is primarily Hispanic. And I did a couple of the trips, and I could see a couple of the kids were having a really, really great time. This one student, Lesiana, was just always beaming, and she did a couple of trips up there. And that summer we had some scholarship money to send some kids to Wyoming. And so I called her guidance counselor, and I said, there was a young man, Albert, and I said, Lesiana, I said, I wonder if they'd be interested in going to Wyoming. And he said, I'll let you talk to them. So I talked to the guy a little bit, and I got Lesiana was on the phone, and I said, how'd you like to go to Wyoming for a month? And she goes, where is it? Well, it's out west. You have to look at a map. Well, why do you think I should go? You know, great experience, new stuff, it'd be good for you. She goes, Mr. Costello, I know 3 things. I live in the projects in Newark. I go to West Side High School and I work at a pharmacy. She goes, it's 6 blocks. That's just about all that I know in Newark. She said, I haven't even been around Newark yet. She was probably a junior in high school. So I coached her a little bit. I said, I know you had a great time on the day trip. Why don't you think about doing it? So in the end, the boy decided not to, and she went. And she wrote this letter when she got back of all the first. First time I went in the mountains. First time I swam in the stream. First time I slept under the stars. First time I did this. First time I did that. And in the end, she said, I know if I go to college, I don't want to go to college in New Jersey. I want to go to the mountains somewhere. Because this is the same kid I was talking to before. So she worked 3 part-time jobs and got a partial scholarship to Colorado State University. And went to Colorado State University, joined the ski team and the outing club. And once a year, she'd write me a little note. This is what I'm doing right now. I can't believe all this stuff's happening. Senior year, I got a note. I was selected from the college to go to Venezuela for my last year. And she said, and by the way, a couple of months ago, I went home to Newark, to my neighborhood, and I saw a bunch of my old friends, and the first thing they asked me was, how many kids did I have? And I go, and she goes, well, most of my girlfriends were unmarried with children. She goes, and I knew that that door you opened for me changed my life, and I went down a different road. And you know, the last communication I had, she was had a job, did her master's degree in Florida, and was working in Florida. And I thought, oh, that just started from, you know, just saying, hey, you want to go try this out. And I wish we could all do that for 1,000 kids a year. It was really one of the things is just really fun to remember. There's some other things. Let's take a couple minutes.
I just have a couple more, and then we're going to show you some slides, and then we're going to open up questions for you. So think of a few good ones. So tell us about when the Pine Barrens became an important part of the project.
I think in Action Bound, we used the Pine Barrens a lot, and Jose and I decided we would continue to make the Pine Barrens, which is 1.1 million acres in southern New Jersey, a big part of the project. In the 60s, there was a plan to build the largest jet port in the world there, and for 5 years it was a huge environmental battle, and it was eventually killed and never started, thank God. It would have been a monstrosity. But we just felt it was important to get kids into the Pine Barrens to experience it, hike it, canoe it, and it was always a big part. Never without a few stories. On our famous Cedar Creek is kind of right in the middle of the Pine Barrens, and it's in a creek we use a lot. And one year my board of trustees organized a fundraiser canoe trip where we charged a little extra money, and we took about 40 people down Cedar Creek. We only had a few canoes in those days, so I rented all these canoes from this commercial company that we always had a rough relationship with, but it was the only one around in those days.
So we meet at this little spot, and we're doing some IGs, and they're supposed to bring, the rental company's supposed to be there, 10 o'clock. Well, 10 o'clock, they don't come, 10:30, they don't come. 11 o'clock, nothing. And I'm on the phone calling them, nobody's answering. I'm getting to be a nervous wreck. People are coming up to me, hey, this is we pay a little extra money, and what's going on? Just relax, it's going to be okay. So all of a sudden, here he comes. Here comes the rental guy with his truck. We unload all the canoes, and just before he took off, he calls me over to his truck. He goes, I forgot to bring the paddles, and I can't come back for 2 hours. And he drives away. I go, what the heck am I going to do? We got all these canoes, no paddles. He did us some PFDs, no paddles. So I thought, well, let me see what I can do here. So everybody came around, they're going, Bill, there's no paddles, there's no paddles. And I go, well, we're kind of environmentally conscious. The Sierra Club is talking about how much damage the paddles do on some of the smaller streams here. Today, we're not going to use paddles. You can use your hands. It was about 98 degrees. I said, if you want to swim, it's a really the next deep river. So you could swim down. We can break off some sticks. You can pole your way down. But we decided today we're not going to use paddles. Out of the 40 people, there were only about 3 that came over at the end and said, the last trip we ever do. Most everybody just got into it. In the end, I told them what happened. They were cool with it. Cedar Creek, we have about 1 million stories I see.
So, it's my final question for you. What stories have you learned from your children?
So my son is Reed and my daughter is Julie. And when they were young, when Reed was 5 years old, I was taking a group of college students on a caving trip. And I asked him if he wanted to go. And he said, why do you think I should go? I'm like, well, doing new things is a really good way of building self-confidence instead of just doing the same things over and over. And I said, it was February. I told him it's going to be a little chilly in the cave. I'm bundling up a little bit. I said, but I think it'd be fun. He said, well, let me think about it. A little later on, he goes, I think I'd like to go. I said, all right. So we met the college kids, and the first 2 hours, and I also decided I was going to prank the class a little bit this night. So the first 2 hours going into the cave was pretty dry. We were crawling, we were, slithering around. Part of it you could walk, and ended up in this big room. And we were reading some ghost stories and laughing, having a good time, and had all of our lights out. You could hear somebody crawling in the cave. And after a while, you could tell they were getting closer and closer, and everybody's going, and all of a sudden, somebody yells out, I have 2 large pepperoni pizzas for Costello. The kids will look at each other and go, nobody would deliver in a cave. I go, there's one place that'll deliver. Give them a good tip, they'll deliver it. No, impossible. Nobody would come in here and do it. But they did run in and pick up a pizzas and leave. And probably 20 years later, I ran into one of the guys, and he goes, this person came over and goes, just tell me one thing, did they really deliver those? Yeah, they did. So, on our way out, it was a different story. It was really wet. We had to go through a couple of passageways that were waist deep in freezing water, passing Reed along, but he got soaking wet in the process of crawling. We got out of the cave, and walked down to our car, and I had some dry clothes, got the heater on, had some hot chocolate in the thermos, and we're starting to drive home, and I go, how was the cave trip for you? He goes, well, Dad, I'm only 5, and I don't know what self-confidence is, but I know I don't need any more. Slow down a little bit, introducing my kids to Alan.
From my daughter, I think I learned a little humor. When she was 3.5, it was really, really hot summer, and there were a few nights at dinner when I was drinking the beer, and she would say, what's that? I'd go, oh, it's beer, Duke, and I tasted it a little bit. I probably wouldn't win any parenting awards for this. But yeah, you can taste a little bit. Just taste it. Probably 5 or 6 times that summer she would taste a little bit of beer. And she was going into the hospital with some very, very, very serious surgery. And after her surgery, she was in intensive care for a while. And 5 or 6 days with tubes running all over her. And then there was this big, big day when she was getting all the tubes taken out. And you know, she was in her crib there, and the surgeon came over, and we were all standing around, nurses, surgeon, Bobby, and I. And you know, she was really hoarse from being having all the tubes in her throat. So the surgeon leaned down and listened to her, and he goes, "You think your daughter's going to be fine? She just asked me to get her a beer." And then I think I learned the importance of humor in tight situations.
Show some slides?
Yeah.
Okay.
Got a couple slides I'd like to clear without boring you. Nobody was on belay. Everybody carried their weapons through, of course. And it was live screwed and bolted and nailed and lashed and everything we could think of with bullets. We didn't get it done in time before the first inspection. And we had one more event to go, and we didn't have time to do it, so we just told people to jump off. The first 3 people got hurt and said, all right, well, we're not going to come. Somehow I managed to talk my wife into going to Hurricane for 2 islands and living in a 12 by 12 tent for the summer. How much fun that was going to be. And we had a great, great, great time with the hurricane. I was not a sailor, and I kept thinking, what's the big deal about putting some kids in a boat, you know, and going out in the bay, and how stressful is that going to be? I wasn't convinced it was going to be a great idea. I wanted to see it work. And then usually, in those days, an hurricane had somebody that knew land and somebody that knew sea together, working as a team. So it took one storm for me to realize why the boats were really cool. They had water crashing in over the side, kids throwing up, kids praying. It was the most amazing team building thing I'd ever seen in my life. Everything was wet. We hadn't figured out food yet. We ate, wet peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, wet ham and cheese sandwiches. It was like the most miserable time you could imagine. But we were just, all the instructors kept saying, man, I hope we get a big storm. I don't want one of those nice sunny calm days. I want to get really jumped on out there by the water. And it was great. We hadn't learned how to sleep on the oars yet. That came later. We hadn't learned how to cook on the boats yet. So we just slept in the bilge wherever we could when we got tired, and then kept going. Multi-day stuff. And when the wind died down, we rowed and rowed and rowed and rowed. And of course, if you know Maine, there's plenty of fog. So one of my last courses up there, I gave the kids an option of what do you want to do on the last day? And we had done a little rock climbing over in Idaho, part of the Canadian National Park. And they said, we'd like to go back to Idaho one more day. I said, all right, that's really cool. I said, we'll have to leave at 4 in the morning. We'll row and sail, we'll rock climb, and then we'll come back. Okay, that's great. We'll do it. So we were pretty tired. We had been up all night. Last day, of course, came down to Valley Cove where the boats were. It was foggy, and it was dark, and everybody was tired. We piled into the boats. I was sitting in the stern with the coxswain, and, we were probably rowing 20 minutes. And I'm looking out over the side, and I noticed this little speck of seaweed that hadn't moved yet. And I walked back, and we were still tied to the dock.
This is Action Bound. My partner Jose in the back with a really cool backpacks and stuff. This is probably 1969. I don't know if Greg remembers the story, but I thought it'd be great to have kids work in a hospital. I went to a couple of hospitals in Trenton that had me out. Can't go. Then I went to St. Francis Hospital, which is pretty close to the school, and another nun services. And this nun says, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to have kids work in the emergency room. How can we do it?" He said, "You just teach like a first aid course. Let me interview the kids and let me see. I want to do it too. We're going to make it work." Can't believe this. Great. So I had 4 kids. These are also Ben and Ralph, were 2 of the kids with the chicken. So they trained in the emergency room to do every possible thing other than put sutures in and help people. They worked a couple days a week after school. And it was funny, after about the first month, the nurses said, "If we could just stop him from fainting." Really great. Now, Ralph worked in the hospital for 20 years after the program ended. And I went to see him a couple times. I could never catch his shift, but they told me he had stayed in the hospital for 20 years. This is the first week of Wildcat Mountain. We had 3 2-person tents. We had everything we owned in one tent, and the rest of us slept in the other 2. And this is 1972. For 12 years, we only had 2 hospital army tents. That was it. We had a trailer where we had a little stove and a little kitchen where we ate. One tent was geared and 10 people slept in. But you knew it was a tough place. It was harder to live there, than work there. It was a tough place. We didn't have a staff house up there for 12 years. This is the debriefing in the wintertime. Really, not the ideal place to do anything. But it's a very cold place. The locals say it's the coldest place in New Jersey. This was a trailer that was where we got warm, had a fire, cooked. That was pretty much all we had for a long time. Really, that's all we wanted for a while. This is probably 75. We had all of our equipment in our little green tent back there. Also, 75, we had one van. The season was always broken down. We did all of our transportation, 1 people all over the place. Jason Ringel one day was cleaning up base camp and he turned around and he was nose to nose with a 6-foot black bear. See that too. And the bear, Jason froze and the bear just smelled him from his head to his toes for about 15 minutes. Jason just stayed there like this, and then after a while the bear got down and walked away. On the staff training schedule, this would be listed as swamp ecology. St. Anne's Grammar School. We usually do a night and a day in Newark as part of our June staff training, which includes sleeping on the roof of one of the 3 or 4 schools we work with. And really a cool experience. The first time I went to St. Anne's to do this, they showed me where the ladder was to the roof, and there was a trap door. It was nailed shut. And I knew right away nobody had been on that roof for a long time. So I got a pry bar, I pried off the hatch, set up on the same roof, and I was knee deep in every imaginable kind of ball you can imagine. Baseballs, wiffle balls, knee deep, there's thousands of balls. And it just happened to be recess. I started flinging these balls off the roof. The kids were running out. There's a ball! Shirt with your pockets. they're booked back everywhere. There are thousands of balls blown in the air. And I was just up there laughing and having a great time. It's winter canoeing in the Pine Barrens. When we started the trip, the staff did a little recon. Said, one part of the creek is not frozen. So in about 15 minutes, we hit this bog, and the bottom is frozen. It was a short canoe trip. One of the things Outward Bound asks us to do, they do an annual fundraiser in October at some hotel in New York City. Going all the way back to the 70s, they would ask us to come in and set up some events for their cocktail hour. That's a little shaky. People are having a few drinks and we're, we held down a spiral staircase. It was always a little nerve-wracking, both for us. We usually only had a few hours to set it all up. And poor Ian Wade from Outward Bound had to come in and say, okay, this is okay, this is okay. He was always as we were. Burger Bridge in Plaza Hotel Terrace Ballroom. The first time I went in the room, 3 walls are glass. One wall has a couple of pillars that you can see behind here. And we had no idea how we were going to anchor anything. That was the only space we had. We had ropes running through heat vents into other rooms, being anchored through the walls. And it was crazy. And this burner bridge was a big hit. A lot of people wanted to go off and do that. And I don't know, this guy Will Sawyer used to work for OBI. So he was there that night. And he came up to me and he goes, my father is 96. He's the oldest Outward Bound graduate that anybody knows of. He wants to go on the Burma Bridge. I go, well, that's fine. We got the spires all over the place. So father goes down. His father's about halfway out on the Burma Bridge, and Will comes over. He goes, I did tell you he's blind, didn't I? So, no, you left that out. He's blind. So we ran over, and somebody run behind him and kind of hold him by his harness and get him off the bridge. This is our road, our front gate to Wildcat Mountain. And I've spoken a lot about people that come up our road, staff that come up our road. And basically we have, 2 kinds. And we were so lucky in the 70s, especially when we had no resources. People that came up our road would come up and say, hey, Bill, how can I help? What do you need? What can I do for the project? And we put people to work, and it was great. Every once in a while, you'd have somebody come up and say, I'd like to work here, and here's the list of all the things I need to do. It was a little different. And I'd say to you, when you work with a small program, if you like it, I think having an attitude is, what I can do, what can I do, how can I help? It's so much different than coming in with a whole list of demands, although we might have to do that too. But we would have never survived without people like all the project staff that are sitting over here that walked up our road and said, what can I do? And that was, that saved us for many, many years. People used to laugh at me in AEE, and they said, an outdoor program in New Jersey, what do you do, backpack along the turnpike? What do you do? No, we find, we're pretty imaginative, we find different things to do. And one winter we came up with this idea of the Jersey Journey, which was a 36-day trip completely around the perimeter of New Jersey. If you can think of it, we hiked the Appalachian Trail, canoe down the Delaware River. This has gone through Philadelphia. Bicycle around South Jersey, sail it back up the coast, and somehow get back to Wildcat. And we did it probably 7 or 8 different times. Complete trip all around the entire state. And maybe one day off to do laundry. It was our way of showing everybody doesn't need to go to Colorado to have an experience that we remember the whole life. Albert Lukes, this is the boatyard owner that told us to bring the boat in, and he helped us out. The retired school principal, just a complete character. And I think one of the things we miss in our field is an opportunity to have youngsters meet and spend time with seniors that have a lot to offer. And now we would mesmerize kids talking about Stanley and working at the boatyard. The boatyard, the entire boatyard looked like that porch. Things everywhere, old engines piled up, anything you couldn't buy in the store, he had 2 of them in his yard. And it was just a great place for kids to hang out. Sam Hunt is like the mayor of the Pine Barrens before he passed away last year. He built that banjo that he's playing. He built the chair he's sitting on. And he lived alone in a cabin in the woods. And we all visited him many, many times. And he'd break that banjo out and play some songs and take you on a hike in the woods to show you the biggest cedar tree in South Jersey. Loved having kids come to visit. And again, I thought, there's nobody to take his place, but we learn so much by spending time with Sammy. This is his Barnegat-based sneak box that he used to build 6 or 8 a year. Back in the 70s, Fred Ferber gave us permission to build the cabin up at Wildcat. This was our first cabin that we built. After he passed away, the state made us take it down when they took over his land, and they didn't want the cabin on their property, so we had to dismantle this cabin. And it was a dream of ours for years to have our own log cabin. So in 1998, we banked some money for a couple of years, and we decided we build our own cabin. We bought these logs and materials from Wisconsin, and the entire cabin was built by our staff rather than contracting out. We just contracted for the stonework. Well, this was probably a year-plus project, and we worked on it between our programs whenever we could. The whole crew sitting over here all worked on it, and we didn't want to get done. It was just such a great project to do. We just felt we kept hoping maybe we could something we could do on it tomorrow. I had something. We're not allowed to live in it because of the zoning, but it's our headquarters building. We keep our stuff in there. It's a fabulous place to debrief our courses. A great place to start and end. We're just really, really proud of it. Just ice climbing in Buttermilk Falls and Stokes Forest. Most of the last few years it hasn't been frozen enough to do that. And again, I think we spent a lot of time figuring out places to go in New Jersey where kids would feel like they're not in the city. And we've found a number of just beautiful little places spread around the state. To me, this little picture really describes the project. The state asked us a couple of years ago to help build some new Osprey towers. The Osprey used to have 500 nesting places in New Jersey, and 3 years ago there were only 150 left. Development took a lot of them. A lot of them just collapsed over the years. So we set out to do a bunch of these Osprey towers. And it meant teaching kids how to canoe or kayak a lot of times, and taking the materials out. And this picture to me says diversity, adventure, service, and that's really who we are. He was a fighter pilot in World War II. And he was a great partner for me, a great mentor. He had been through a lot in World War II. He had been shot down 4 different times as a fighter pilot. And For a long time, people thought he was dead. People in his old unit didn't know he was still alive. They didn't go to any reunions or anything, and then they found him living in Pennsylvania, and he got a number of awards. And one of his awards is pretty amazing. And during the war, at one point the U.S. was building some bases in Burma to fight the Japanese, and he was flying over there. He had flying a fighter pilot. And see how this goes. There were only a few people that were trained to fly at night and had the equipment to do it. And he was one of them. And actually, then there were some more. But at this one particular evening, his was the only plane that was okay and had the equipment to fly at night. And the U.S. Intelligence got word that 90 Japanese bombers were coming to obliterate this base. And some general called up and said, "Send up the night fighters." He said, "Yeah, okay, we'll do that." He goes, "Phil, that was me." Because I was the only one. He said, and I knew I would go up and I'd get a few of them, and I knew that'd be my last night in the war. And so as they took off, and he's quite a character, and as he was flying to meet the Japanese, he started a radio conversation with this base that he had 80 planes with him. And the correspondence was intercepted by the Japanese, and they turned their planes around and left. And when Jose landed, he was a hero. He was a hero who saved the base, saved all these guys. And he goes, and the next day we were back in the war. And nobody ever remembered it until about 5 years ago, when people were looking at the history pieces of World War II. They found that story and they came and found him. And then we went to Alabama and he got a really great award for that. There's a group called the Flying Eagle, the Eagles, I guess it's called. And it's people like John Glenn, people like astronauts, and Jose was inducted into that group for that evening. There's a question back there. Yeah.
What's next?
Good question. I think we're always, staying open to new ideas. We've dabbled in a couple of things. We've dabbled in some farm camp ideas of taking kids to. There's 9,000 farms in New Jersey. Vegetable farms, horse farms, sod farms, fruit farms. So we think it's a great resource. So we've been playing with getting kids on the farms, having some experiences there. So that's one thing. We had a base in the Pine Barrens for a long time that we lost last year, and we just worked out an arrangement before we came up here with the New Jersey Conservation Foundation for a new base in the Pine Barrens that would be for land and canoe trips. So we're just starting to organize that a little bit. We always looked at New Jersey as being our classroom. We didn't ever feel like Wildcat was our only site. New Jersey's small enough, although we all drive way too much, that we decided New Jersey would be our classroom, and that would be kind of our theme as we developed it.
All right. Phil, I'm going to turn over to you to close this. Remember, recognizing you.
Nice job, Eve.
I think that we always encourage kids that they don't know what they're capable of doing, and we're always encouraging them. And I think we too don't know what we're capable of. I've taught a workshop at AEE a number of times on starting your own program, and there's always 6, 8 people there saying, "I got this idea, just can't get to the point where I want to do it. I know we need this in our community. I want to do this." And I think we don't know our own capabilities. And this is a great reading from Nelson Mandela. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond all measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small doesn't serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We were born to manifest the glory of God that is within us. Not just in some of us, it's in all of us. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fears, our presence automatically liberates others. And for those staff from Project U.S.E that walked up our road, and for those of you that have walked up other roads in the Northeast, I love this To Be of Use by Marge Pearson. The people I love the best jump into work head first without dallying in the shallows, and swim off with shore strokes almost out of sight. They seem to become natives of that element, the black slink heads of seals bouncing like half-submerged balls. I love people who harness themselves, an ox to a heavy cart, who pull like water buffalo with massive patience, who strain in the mud and the muck to move things forward, who do what has to be done again, again, and again. I want to be with people who will submerge in a task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row, pass the bags along, who are not pollard generals or field deserters, but move in a common rhythm, when the food must come in or the fire must be put out. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust. But the thing worth doing well has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amorphous for wine or oil, Hopi vases that are held formed are put in museums. But you know they were made to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and the person for work that is real. I think no matter who you think you are, we are all teachers. And I don't think you should ever underestimate the power of your teaching. It'll come back again and again over the years to remind you of that. I don't think you should ever be satisfied with your work, no matter how good you think you are. Don't ever be satisfied with it. Take a look at it. There can always be something a little better, a little different. And don't fall into the routine of just doing things the same way. I think it's easy to do a good course, a good program, but it's an art to do a great one. And think of every possible thing you can put in there, every possible way to make it better. And I think it's great to do as much as you can for everybody you love, everybody you work with, and maybe a few strangers along the way. I want to take a moment to acknowledge my wife, Bobby, who has been my partner for 38 years and putting up with a lot of, I'm going to be late for dinner again, I've got to work this weekend. And on top of that, before we were married, I worked through the Appalachian Mountain Club. I talked her into coming to New Hampshire one time and hiking from Mount Madison to Lakes of the Clouds in 1 August. And we were caught in a blizzard, and before we were in 8 inches of snow, and she went unconscious, which then was just called exposure. And had her in her sleeping bag, flag down the Cog Railway to get her up to the summit and nurse her back to health. And she's still married. I think it's important also to find for yourself some inspiration, something that inspires you for the days when you need to be inspired. And I'll share one with you. One of the years I was in the Marine Corps, I played on this football team with guys from all branches of the service. And I got to be friendly with a guy named Lance Sargent, who was an enlisted Air Force guy. And I knew after a while that he ended up at the Air Force Academy and became a pilot. And that was really the last contact I had. And then I was visiting my mom one time in the early 70s, and I pick up Reader's Digest, and this picture is on the cover of Reader's Digest. And I read this, I think, one of the most amazing stories to come out of Vietnam. And it turns out that he was a pilot flying a mission in North Vietnam, and the Air Force was testing some new kinds of equipment, and he either fired a rocket or dropped a bomb. As soon as it left the plane, it exploded and destroyed his plane. And he parachuted down into the side of the mountain in Laos, and had a fractured leg, had multiple head wounds and a broken arm, and they couldn't get him out. They couldn't get him out of there. And the only way he could move was lying on his back and pushing with his good leg. And he went unconscious for days at a time. And after a period of time, he crawled out to a road. And in the meantime, he was eating whatever he could, taking leeches off his body, eating plants, bugs, insects, whatever he could. Crawled out to a road and passed out. It was Christmas morning. He had been crawling for 47 days. 47 days. I go, I don't know anybody that could do that or could have done that. So he was captured, and they thought he would be an easy mark because he was near death, and he would not cooperate, he would not talk, he would not tell them anything other than name, rank, and serial number. And he was tortured and died in Hanoi in solitary confinement. And later, as President Johnson gave his parents his Medal of Honor, he was awarded the Medal of Honor for his heroics. If you visited the Air Force Academy, you'd probably be on your tour would be Sergeant Hall. And if you walked in Sergeant Hall, his portrait's there, and the cadets, when they go in and out, snap him a salute. And that's my inspiration when I need to be inspired. I think back, you know, if Lance had to do that, I could certainly do this piddly stuff that I have to do. He's gotten me through some pretty hard days. So it's a pleasure, and I just have one more thing for you, and that is to live strong.